Good morning. Welcome into 5 Clubs here on Golf Channel. You can also listen to us on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. I am Gary Williams, and this program proudly presented by Century Insurance. We are very proud to be aligned with them. They are invested in golf in the best ways. Their relationship with the USGA, with the first tee, and of course, sponsoring the first event on the PGA Tour schedule, Golf Pride. Every player at every level trusts Golf Pride more than any group globally in the world. Of course, Peter Millar, anything you need, wherever you're going, luxury and style refined by Peter Millar. And of course, Pinehurst Resort, there's never a bad time to be at Pinehurst. Looking forward to this program because steak for breakfast is always a good idea. It's always a good result. We're always satisfied. Johnson, Wagner, Brendon de Jonge will be with me for the balance of the last half hour of the program, getting their thoughts on a lot of things, what has already transpired this week at Bay Hill, and a little peek ahead to the players. And also John Wood of the NBC broadcast team is going to join us. He's the team manager for the Ryder Cup. So that role alone is interesting. That could be a 30-minute conversation. Excited to talk to him as well. Well, one of the stories that came out of kind of the end of last week and bled into yesterday was the absence in the field this week of Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler at the Arnold Palmer Invitational presented by MasterCard. And it leads to a couple things with respect to signature series events and what exactly is a sponsor exemption and how do you define who deserves one. Let's stop right there. Nobody necessarily deserves anything. That's what it is. It's not earned, it's not deserved, it's gifted. And a lot of times gifts you look at and you go, oh, they didn't deserve that. You're right, they didn't. That's what gifts are. Sponsor exemptions have always been an interesting conversation as it pertains to what this is that we cover primarily, and that is professional golf. Professional golf has lived on, and I think in large measure, rightfully so, the idea that it is a meritocracy. But you know what? Over the last 10, 15, 20, keep going even further, I think 25 years, the notion of it being a meritocracy has eroded. Because starting with the World Golf Championship Series, which was smaller fields, show up money, no cut events, where's the merit in that? The idea that you got to play well, that if you don't play well enough the first 2 days, there's jeopardy associated with your performance. Like, you're out the door, down to the match play, which we used to decry or declare that Wednesday of the match play was the best Wednesday in golf. Now, the truth is, give me the competition for the other great Wednesdays in golf, other than the par 3 contest at the Masters tournament. And even that has been done away with. We now have pool play. We don't even have the match play anymore. I think it'll come back eventually. So sponsor exemptions. Let's please cast aside the idea that Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler were either snubbed or they were deprived. No, they just weren't chosen. And that's what it is. It's a choice. It's a choice made by a company which for many, many years, we've seen the acceleration of purses going from $3 million to $5 million to $8 million to $10 million to now swallow hard $20 million for signature series events. And if you think, based on however you want to aggregate the rankings or the ratings of these events, that $20 million seems like a reasonable business investment, and that's annually. These companies have like somewhere between 60, 80, $100 million invested in these sponsorships for these signature series events. So shouldn't they have some control over that business? And their business is to get business, people to watch and people to come. So if you said to me just on the merits of who's better for business, Jordan Spieth as a personality, or Rafael Campos. And here's the hard part about having this conversation. I don't want to denigrate anybody. All these guys are on the best tour in the world. And some of them apparently write really good letters. And by virtue of that, that might have been the impetus for the Arnold Palmer Invitational presented by MasterCard making the choice to give a sponsor exemption to Rafael Campos. Again, it's their choice. Do I think it was good for their business to pick him over Jordan Spieth? Of course it wasn't. Not only is Jordan Spieth a guy who's playing better, Rafael Campos has missed 5 cuts and 7 starts this year. And Jordan Spieth is coming off another top 10, in addition to top 5ing in another event. And he is inarguably one of the biggest names and biggest draws in a sport that desperately needs draws, since it's been depleted by the presence of LIV. So if you want to call sponsor exemptions as a whole, in terms of the premise of them to begin with, a farce, that's fine. We can have that conversation, but they exist. And they've existed for a long time. So I have never said he should or he shouldn't or she shouldn't be in the field. It's their choice. It's their business. And they made the choice to have who they've had and who they're having this year. Mackenzie Hughes, Minwoo Lee, Justin Rose, who has a relationship with a sponsor, MasterCard, and the aforementioned Rafael Campos. So as long as we're going to continue to have these, if you want to take time about talking about somebody earned it more than somebody else, it's kind of like the Ryder Cup conversation when people say, well, that guy got snubbed. How? How did somebody get snubbed if we have quantitative data baselines as to this person's on because they're in the top 6? And then after that, it's at the discretion of the captain. And the captain is constructing his team in a format that is never used other than once a year. And even then, when it's used in the President's Cup, it's not completely analogous to the Ryder Cup because you can actually set up your matchups in that event compared to the Ryder Cup. So when we have this conversation later this year, I can promise you, you're not going to hear me use the term snubbed about anybody. Would I sit here and say, well, I would have made that choice over that guy? Yes. But snubbed? No. Was Jordan Spieth snubbed? No. Again, business-wise, would I have made the choice to have him or Ricky Fowler over a couple other players? I would, but they didn't. And it's their choice, because when you spend that kind of money, and again, I think it's for business, not the best. And one last thing, with respect to the Signature Series, as we go forward, in terms of, is it working, is it not working? They need more storylines leading into, because there are 6 different ways to get into these events. Top 50 from the previous year earmarks you for the Signature Series the following year. And then you take official World Golf Rankings, top 30, that is your entry point. Next 10, Aon, Swing 5, and sponsor exemptions, and winners in the calendar year. Those are the ways. I would add more. I think there are other ways to create storylines in the previous week that don't necessarily materialize every single week preceding a Signature Series event. You need more thread to create fabric that people want to wrap around themselves, not only in the moment for the week that is occurring right now, like the Cognizant. Let's say you had somebody who was potentially going to get into the top 5 just that week, and he's a hell of a story. Greenlight him for the next week. There are other ways to create momentum for whatever the next week is that is a Signature Series. That should always be under evaluation, because in order for these things to work, you have to feel like there's momentum, whether it's a Signature Series leading to one or a non-Signature Series event, which again, we've created tiers on the PGA Tour. And by the way, this is more pronounced than maybe it used to be, but don't act like the tier system hasn't always existed. Jack Nicklaus ushered in that tier series when the PGA Tour Players Division broke away from the PGA of America right before 1970. And he said, you know what? My season is about 4 big weeks, and I will augment my schedule around those 4 monstrous weeks, the major weeks, with who and where I choose to satisfy my schedule. So this is not new. So when Jack didn't play, it felt like a lesser event. You think Tiger didn't follow the same model? Of course he did. But now it's more pronounced because we have the designation of what these events are. I have no problem with the tier system because it's always existed. It now is in writing. But they need to do more and need to be constantly thinking about ways to make stories from the previous weeks come to life in the weeks in which these events are occurring. We're going to take a break. John Wood's going to join me, team manager I wonder if he has a business card with that title on it. I'd like one just to have in my billfold. I don't even have a billfold, but I like saying that. He's going to join me. He's part of the NBC broadcast team, and also doing what he's doing in a dual role in the evaluation of what he's seen so far as it relates to Europe and the United States, and also steak for breakfast. Johnson Wagner, Brendon de Jonge will join me in studio for the last half of the program. It's a Tuesday edition of Five Clubs right here on Golf Channel, and you can listen to us on the PGA Tour Radio Network. We are back right after this. We're back in on this Tuesday. It is Five Clubs right here on Golf Channel, and you can also listen to us on the PGA Tour Radio Network right on Sirius XM. Joining me now, he's the team manager for the United States Ryder Cup team and also a big part of the broadcast team on NBC Sports. Of course, they go from the Cognizant up the road to Orlando, Florida, to Bay Hill Club and Lodge. I'm speaking of John Wood, who joins me now. This segment brought to you by Golf Pride, the most trusted grip in golf. John, my friend, by the way, I just want people to know, right before we came on, he was looking at the box score from the Giants spring training game. Nobody is more immersed in what is going on with this Giants than you are. How are you?
Guilty as charged. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Lots to get to with you. I always enjoy the conversation. You know, it's interesting. We're in March. But the way that the world is now, because Scotty was injured, he didn't play early when we thought we would see a little bit more of him. Schauffele hadn't played at all. Rory, it's been a few starts. So if I asked you who's played the best golf in 2025, can you give me an answer that you have conviction in?
Boy, that is a great question. I really can't. No one's really stood out yet. You know, it's like you said, some of those big names haven't really stepped up. I would have to say Rory, just because of his win at AT&T at Pebble Beach. But it's such a small sample size, and some of the big names haven't been out there as much. So you know, I would say Rory right now.
Let me ask you about Scotty, because everybody knows his season didn't start when he wanted it to, when it was intended to start. Based on what you've seen, how close do you think he is? Close?
I think he's probably very close, yeah. I haven't spoken with Ted Scott. Usually I talk to Ted a lot, his caddy, but we haven't spoken lately. But I got to think he's getting really close to coming back. And, you know, knowing Scotty Scheffler as mild manners as he seemed, he is so competitive. And I think this might even light a bigger fire under him to get out here and not necessarily catch up, but, you know, remind everybody who he is as a player.
You know, John, one of the things that I've always appreciated about you and about the other guys who were in the job that you formerly had, which was, you know, being out there, carrying a bag for one of the best players in the world, is I know I could go to caddies and say on a Wednesday, what do you think the number is going to be? So with that being said, people were, I think, disoriented by what happened, especially on Thursday of last week with Jake Knapp shooting 59. People were carping about the setup of the golf course. The Florida swing has always been associated with it's more penal, it's more punitive when you make mistakes. Do you think Bay Hill this week is one of the hardest three setups on tour? Non-major.
Without question. Without question. I mean, it started, I would say, you know, when Tiger was winning seemingly every year. In that stretch, I think it was Arnie 100% who decided, I want this to be a major, major test. The rough is always as thick as we play all year, and sometimes even thicker than the U.S. Open. The greens typically get extremely firm by the end of the week. They kind of start off not too bad, and the X factor is always the wind there. If you get that thick a rough, firm greens, and wind, that's the recipe for challenging these guys. You know, you take any of those things away, somebody's going to find a way to shoot a really good score, especially if the conditions are soft. But the fact that you've got all those three, it makes it always one of the toughest tests on tour. And, you know, you can escape from trees. If you hit it into trees, you can escape. You can't escape from hitting it in the water, and there's water all over Bay Hill. It's a white knuckle test from the get-go. If you have plans on winning that tournament from the first hole through the last hole on Sunday, every shot is huge.
The algorithm, if I said to you, if we had setups like this once every 4 weeks or once every 3 weeks, what do you think from the TV standpoint would be best to give to the audience something as arduous as this week could be? How often?
I think that's probably a good number. In my opinion, the signature events have more of an opportunity to do that because nobody's going to skip a signature event. They're going to get the field because obviously the money is huge, the points are huge, all the best players are there. So guys aren't going to pick and choose at the signature events. I think if you're not a signature event, I don't have a problem with what Cognizant did last week because I think a lot of guys would see that telecast and it was so difficult and so penal, and they're thinking, I don't want to go somewhere where I'm going to get beat up right before the Arnold Palmer Invitational and the Players' Championship. So I know some guys had a problem with last week, but I think it's possible that some of these events that aren't signature events might want to make it more conducive to scoring and make it more enjoyable to play the golf course. So I think those really stern tests should come at the signature events. And like I said, players won't have a choice whether they skip them or not. They're going to play no matter what.
John, would you alter or tweak the criteria, the size of fields? Some have cuts, some don't. What would you change or alter going into 2026 if you could?
I've always liked the cut, personally. I just think it adds so much to the week knowing that you can't just, not mail it in. Certainly not. None of these guys mail it in, but have no pressure on them for the first 2 days and kind of, just play golf and see what happens and see where they are after 2 days and then make adjustments going into the weekend. Some of the most pressure I've ever felt as a caddy were on Friday afternoons, especially at big tournaments. The worst feeling in the world is knowing you're not going to have a chance at all on Saturday and Sunday because you're not going to be there. So I love that Friday pressure of having to make a cut when you're close. So if I could do anything, I would bring back the cuts and not have no cut events. I just think it adds so much to the storyline of the week. Well, I mean, look at last week. Highsmith had a 4.5 footer to make the cut on the number. Now, we didn't know what was going to happen over the weekend, but he misses that, and this story doesn't even develop. So I think I think having cuts on Friday is a good thing.
For people who don't know, you're a very curious guy. So you're always got your antenna up on things that are interesting to you. You're now in a position where you have another responsibility that will culminate in September at the Ryder Cup. Have you noticed the way that you're observing things, maybe writing down notes, gathering information, is different than the way that you've done your job in the past?
Maybe a little bit. It's been more so collecting information to give out to players and to caddies, what to expect, what we're planning, asking their opinions on things. Not necessarily yet watching what kind of form they're in. It's more so me kind of trying to provide to them anything they might want to know rather than, picking getting information from them. So I think possibly when I'm in groups with guys that I would expect to be on the team, I'm certainly watching and maybe talking to them more, talking to their caddies more, just to be in touch and just so they know if they have any questions, want any information, they can come to me. And it's all going to be kept private, obviously.
Like you said, you're not as wrapped up in form right now because it can be fickle. But I know it's not lost on you that Europe is off to a great start in the collective with wins on the PGA Tour. You had a few more, obviously on the DP World Tour, a winner on Live from Adrian Meronk. I think that they have more depth than they've ever had. You have to know your opponent. Would you share that feeling that their depth is showing?
They do have quite a bit of depth, and I think you're exactly right. More than they've had in the past. You remember when they started winning a lot of Ryder Cups in the 80s, it was basically those big five players that kind of carried the team, played all 5 matches all the time. And even in recent years, it's been very, very top heavy. The way they've done it, though, is kind of bring the rookies along with the veterans, pair them together, and kind of come to here's how we do things on this European team, and they've learned. But they are a very deep, formidable team right now, with a lot of young players who are hungry. So it's going to be a huge challenge. I think it's going to be one of the best events in the history of golf. Personally, I think a Ryder Cup in itself anywhere is great, but being that it's at Bethpage, that Europe is strong, that the U.S. is strong, it's going to be a great battle.
It absolutely is. You know, you've been involved in this system for a very long time, so you've seen in a non-team environment sport, team building trying to be conducted, and for the United States on an annual basis with the President's Cup and subsequently with the Ryder Cup. What is the most effective team building exercise you have heard from somebody outside the system, like hypothetically like a Coach K? Is there somebody that said or shared things with you and with the team that really resonated with you?
You know, a few of the team events when Michael Jordan has been around, he's been incredible, and just his insights into competition. Because obviously it's a completely different sport, completely different parameters in what you're trying to do. But some of the things that Jordan talks about in terms of just competition and mindset, and how to, you know, one of the things he said, I remember when he was one of Freddie's assistants at Harding Park was, don't judge. You cannot judge anything that happens until either the hole or the match is over. You know, sometimes you're going to get a shot that if it was a medal play tournament, you just beat yourself up over. But you watch Ryder Cups and President's Cups, you see more balls, more shots holed off the green than you do all year long. And that's because guys don't give up. They don't quit. They put it in their mind that this is where I can really turn something around and do something crazy. And Jordan really imparted that on everybody on that team. It's just that you can't judge yourself or your partner. Go into every shot 100% and give it everything you have, because you never know what's going to happen. We've watched the match play for years. Things turn around in the drop of a hat. So, you know, sometimes you'll get frustrated with your golf swing and be trying to fix your golf swing. Don't try and do that stuff during a Ryder Cup. Try and get the ball in the hole no matter how you can.
John, last thing, give me a little idea of the contrast between this week and next week. Both very demanding tests, but different. What is the biggest difference between Bay Hill and the stadium course?
I would say typically the rough. The rough at Arnie's place is typically much thicker. Sawgrass tends to give you a chance. It's not easy. It's still a significant challenge, but it gives you more of a chance. Whereas Bay Hill, I think sometimes you get in there and it's hack out, hit a wedge down and try and get it up and down from 50 or 80 yards. Whereas I think the Players Championship, if you find the rough, you have a chance to. It's going to be tough. You got to take a little bit of gamble, but even then, if it goes through the rough into the pine straw, you might have a little avenue to try a hero shot. So I would say between those two courses, that's the biggest difference. And of course, the weather. If one week has wind and the next doesn't, it's obviously going to play easier with no wind. So that's the X factor in both weeks, is the wind.
Always enjoy the chat. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks as always.
Thanks for having me. Always great to be on.
Okay, there is John Wood, team manager for the United States Ryder Cup team, and of course, a part of that NBC broadcast team as well. They've got Bay Hill this week. 7 in a row for that crew. We take a break. Johnson Wagner, Brendon de Jonge will join me in studio. Much to get to. Wagyu Filet coming up next. And you know what that means. Little steak for breakfast coming up. This segment brought to you by Peter Millar. Wherever you're going, whatever you need, from the boardroom to a soccer game to playing a round of golf, they have you covered with all their great lines. Refined style and luxury for more than 2 decades. It is Peter Millar. We are ensconced in Peter Millar because Johnson Wagner, Brendon de Jonge, and myself proudly representing the brand. Gentlemen, good morning.
I got a little cashmere on this
morning.
Very
nice.
Very comfortable.
Yeah, that hunter green. Very stylish. To see you two negotiating something during the break was part comical, part tragic, really. Let's talk about this. If he gets up and leaves halfway through, it means that you've moved up the alternate list in Puerto Rico. Where do you sit right now on the alternate list to be in the Puerto Rico Open?
I'm 8th alternate. It's a tournament that he and I both have played really well. It's got a history of the line moving quickly, guys withdrawing late. So if I get in by 1, 2 o'clock tomorrow, there's a 6 p.m. flight, I will be in Puerto Rico. But I'm not going to go down.
Will he be with you?
No, he's asking for too much to be my caddy. I told him I'd pay him well, but he's asking for the moon. And if he does caddy, I'm 100% bringing the big bag.
Well, I need the upfront money because there's no chance he's going to make the cut. There's absolutely no chance he's playing the weekend.
But you did actually say out loud, I want 20% of what you earn.
Well, 20% of nothing is nothing, unfortunately.
I'm going to go down, win. We're going to get into the Players' Championship, and then you can make 20% of a big purse, biggest purse in golf.
So you're promising me the Players if we win Puerto Rico?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm in.
Wow, I didn't realize this show was going to be fiction on a Tuesday. Before we talk about Bay Hill, a little peek ahead to the Players, your thoughts, just having John Wood on, talking about setup. Look, you went out there every week, and you get out there and you go, okay, this is going to be a challenging week. Were you surprised and / disappointed at all with last week?
Well, I think, and we talked about this last night, I think what they've done at that tournament is they've gotten a lot of feedback over the years. I mean, 07 was our rookie year, and that was the first year at PGA National, and it was a brute. The cut was +4, and it was kind of always that way. The rough was thick, it was up. The 10th hole, changing it to a par 4, from a par 4 to a par 5, obviously you can just take 4 strokes off right there, so the winning number would have been 15. But I think in an effort to entice people to come, to not be just beat up on a daily basis, I think they're doing the right things. But
knowing what's after it as well, as John said.
And that being said, like you made the point last night about if it was just normal Bermuda rough and not overseeded, it would play so much more fun. It could be firmer, it could be faster, and having those jumpy irons coming out of that rough would be amazing.
Yeah, I think obviously the overseed, it makes it look great on TV. It makes it pop. We see that bright green look, but I would love it to play as Bermuda. That golf course is so much about angles. You kind of take that away a little bit when you're playing out of a predictable rye rough. When you're in the Bermuda, you need those angles because you don't know if it's going to come out, fast, if it's going to come out slow. And we know that this is a golf course where there's trouble short of greens, there's trouble over greens. So to me, when they overseeded it and the way it played, it kind of lost its identity a little bit.
Yeah, you know, Joe Highsmith was so locked in, like he didn't hit one like scratchy shot. When guys win for the first time, like when you won in Houston, people are like, who is this guy? I need to know something. What, if anything, impressed you most about the fact that he did it in the manner he did it? Not only toward the end, but the whole weekend.
I love seeing a guy make the cut on the number and go on to win, shooting a pair of 64s, but for me, it was the way he finished. You come to that bear trap, now he knows he has the lead.
Yes.
And the 3 iron shots he hit on 15, 16, 17 were perfect. And like leaving it on 17, making that birdie. But 15 to me is one of the hardest shots on the PGA Tour, and to execute it exactly where he needed to under the gun with the lead was remarkable.
I likened it to Thomas Dietrich a couple of weeks before. Like if you'd watched this guy, you didn't know anything about him, you would never have known that he'd never been in that position before, closing out a golf tournament. Like it looked like it was, I mean, not second nature, but he did everything that he needed to down the stretch. And I thought his mindset was impeccable the entire weekend, really.
Yeah, I thought it was cool that Joe LaCava IV is on the bag. You know, decision making. Like you said, people would say they weren't perfect. Under the circumstance, the execution of those shots really was perfect because he took into consideration the fact that now I'm in the lead, in the right weight, the right lines, hitting it past the flag as he did on 16, and again on 18, splitting the fairway. Stories like that are cool, and what happens from here, we'll see. Let's get to the top of the food chain. What do you need to see? Scheffler, Ludwig, Rory. I think right now they're the 3 best players in the world. Would you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
okay.
very much so.
So what, if anything, do you need to see to have them locked in as your 3 favorites at Augusta National? Look, the Players is massive. We're going to do a Players preview that's going to be available by Thursday here. Taylor Zarz will be joining us for that. What do you need to see from those 3?
Well, from Scotty specifically, the way he played Genesis, he showed flashes of #1 player in the world from last year, total dominance, but coming down the stretch, and even on Saturday, he had a lot of pulls off the tee and with his long irons. So at Bay Hill, what I'm looking for, Scotty's had 2 weeks off, get rid of the pulls, put that ball in play like we're used to seeing, because, I mean, 16 at Torrey Pines in the Genesis, he misses that long iron well left in the bunker. He did it on 11 as well, and it just cost him the golf tournament. His good is still good, just need those misses tightened up.
Yeah, I don't think we need to see that much, to be honest, Gary. Like, I think if any of these guys sort of get around contention, if they play some decent golf, if they're in the mix a little bit, that's enough for me. I've seen enough already where these 3 guys will be my favorites.
do you expect that all three, whether it's this week or next week, that deep into the golf tournament, 1, 2, or 3, and that's hard. It's hard to get these guys in that situation a lot, if ever. But do you expect all three of them to truly be in contention, whether it be this week or next week?
Yes, I would expect that. I don't know if you can
Who do
guarantee.
you hesitate with if of the three? Rory?
Probably Rory, mostly at the Players. I don't think, I know he's won it before, but it was a cold, wet week. I don't think the Players Championship is a great fit for Rory. Obviously, it's not a great fit for anybody with the exception of Scottie Scheffler. And Ludwig's just seeing both of these places for the first time, so it certainly wouldn't be surprising to see him in there, but I'm going to give him a little bit of leeway given the fact that these are two golf courses that require a ton of local knowledge, and only seeing these tournaments for the second time, I think that's a hurdle to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think all three will be in contention this week at Bay Hill. I think Bay Hill's a perfect golf course for all of those guys. You got to drive it great. We're going to see some thick rough and firm greens, and the Players is a weird one because there's so many guys that you expect to play well that you don't expect to play well that do. It's that kind of golf course. It's kind of quirky in ways, and anything can really happen that week.
It's true, and that's why I think it's fun. I'm looking forward to doing the preview we're going to do for everybody on it, because guys who have won outside of the win may have no record to speak of, which I think is one of the cool aspects of it. I want to ask you both about the sponsor exemption conversation. In your years, when you looked at who got spots, did you ever go, really? Again? Or really? Why? Look at you guys looking at each other.
I've got one that always irked me a little bit. He was a USAM champ, and I get it. Ricky Barnes seemed to get sponsor exemption after sponsor exemption. He basically earned his card on that and then sustained it for 15 years based on how many spots he would get continuously. Not that he wasn't deserving, but at some point those have to run out a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, there were certain guys that their names would pop up more than you would like to have seen them. I understand you win the USM. That next year, sure, get some exemptions. But yes, with Ricky, that kind of seemed to keep on going for the years following. I have no problem with these sponsor exemptions. I would have understood completely if Spieth had got one. Of course, it makes sense. He's a needle mover. But I also understand him not getting one. I've got no problem with it. He's been given a lot of these exemptions. I don't think it's a great look if we continue to see the same names with sponsor exemptions into all these signature events.
He never really supported that event when it wasn't a signature event.
No, because of the Texas events, it was tricky for him to do a lot of the Florida swing, and then knowing, in addition, he's always going to play the Players, the Masters, and the month of May is a Texas month. So I don't think it was trying to shun Arnold Palmer or the event. It was just, look, certain things line up for certain players, and with respect to this one, it didn't. Do you guys look at it different now with the lens that you have now than you did when you were a player?
Yeah, and I mean, for me, a sponsor exemption is that. If a tournament wants you there, and they have restrictions, you had to have finished in the top 125 last year, and if a sponsor wants a player in the field, it's their right to make that decision. So I really have no issue as long as whoever they pick.
I'm more surprised that Ricky Fowler didn't get one because he was a big supporter of that tournament.
Big time.
He really did.
But the umbrella on his gear.
Yes, exactly.
Came up one year when he was not even in the field to patronize the event. And again, it's their choice. From a business standpoint, there's no one that can argue that the event is better off without either one of them, in particular Spieth, who is giving us an indication that he is more right than he's been in over a year. But I'm not going to jump up and down about this stuff. It's like you said, it's their business, and they've made the choice to go in that direction.
I didn't care for the remarks that Jordan Spieth made. Like, I needed to play better injured was kind of a backhanded slap.
He'd already gotten 2 spots this year.
Yeah, I didn't care for those remarks at all. It was kind of, I don't know, crying about it a little bit.
Let me ask you guys about, in the absence of guys.
You better watch your words there. You're talking about my dog.
Look at your phone. You've been down that road recently. Guys who you are encouraged by or impressed by who have not won, but give me some names of guys that you're like, this guy is playing really good golf.
Justin Thomas. I think Justin Thomas has played some great golf.
He's
at the start
trending.
of the
He's
season.
rising.
He's trending, yeah, and he's got that swagger back. He's got that little chip on his shoulder still going. I think Justin Thomas is primed for some big things.
I've been incredibly impressed. Now he won the last event of the year, but Maverick McNeely
Big time.
has moved up to 12th in the world, and just some Americans that he's ahead of right now: Cantlay, Henley, Bradley, Billy Ho, Thigala, Finau, Burns, and Akshay Bhatia. Guys that you think of as top players. Maverick McNeely is on the cusp of being a top 10 player in the world. The run he's been on since middle of last fall through now has been impressive. And if it weren't for Ludwig going off on those last 5 holes at the Genesis, Maverick McNeely would be a signature event champion.
It's interesting because this gets to the other names you just mentioned, who he's ahead of in the world rankings. I think the back half, and again, I understand it's early March, but of the United States Ryder Cup team, the complexion of the back half of that roster could be the likes of a Maverick McNeely. I think it's plausible. And then I know people are kicking around Luke Clanton, like people have got this infatuation with him. Akshay Bhatia, who has a couple of top 10s. He had back-to-back 9th place finishes on the West Coast as well. Russell Henley, who was on the President's Cup team, who clearly vibed with Scotty Scheffler, which again, you start looking who's flexible, who's comfortable with certain people. Russell Henley always plays well at the Cognizant at PGA National. He's another guy who I think can validate the skin of being on the President's Cup team. It wouldn't surprise me if he was on the Ryder Cup team.
Oh, not at all. I've got Russell Henley on there.
He's got a lot of moxie.
Yes, he does, and I think he shows up every week now. He's around the lead. I think the knock on him is he hasn't won enough because of the amount of times he's been in that position, but it seems like he's around the lead every week now.
And just to touch on the Luke Clanton thing,
yes.
I mean, Ludwig Oberg hadn't played really professional. He had played a couple professional events when he got his card, and he made it onto that European team. Luke Clanton has done a ton at the PGA Tour level, so who knows what he's going to be capable of after NCAAs this year. He's going to go on. He may very well.
He's inside the top 100 in the world.
I know he may.
Amateur.
Like, I don't think that's a stretch to think that he could legitimately be on that team. He's fiery, some young blood. If I was one of these American players, I would love to be a partner with Luke Clanton.
I'm with you. Also, if you look historically, rookies. There are a lot of rookies who played very, very well, whether it be home or on the road, United States and Europe. If you want to go back to Sergio in '99 at Brookline and him and Jesper Parnevik doing piggybacking all over the country club. But even before that, there are guys who showed up for the first time going all the way back to the 70s. And you're like, they responded to the environment. Tony Finau in Paris played exceptionally well and had not been on a team before. I think it's plausible. There's no doubt. Much more to get to with the guys as we continue with you on this Tuesday. Little steak for breakfast, Wagyu Filet, Brendon de Jonge, Johnson Wagner. Back with you guys right after this. Back in on Five Clubs. You notice with Johnson and Brendon, they're always laughing. They're always laughing. Why wouldn't they? Who has a better life than these two guys? This segment brought to you by Pinehurst. There's always a good reason to be at Pinehurst. I've been there the last 2 weekends. Pinehurst number 10's clubhouse and restaurants going to be done for the summer. And the cottages at Pinehurst number 8 will be available for you to rent and stay in. I toured them in May. Amazing what's happening there. All right, guys. The Korn Ferry Tour, both of you proudly products of. With respect to the idea of using the Korn Ferry Tour, it wouldn't be the first time to look at things that might be adopted on the PGA Tour. I had Andy Weiss, the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of the PGA Tour, on yesterday. Let me ask you first with the shot clock. 1, do you like the concept of it? And 2, do you think that you should test that and other things at the Korn Ferry Tour level?
Yes, I like the idea of testing things at the Korn Ferry level, but I think the shot clock is a bad idea.
Okay.
I mean, we have rules officials out there to time slow groups. There basically is a shot clock in place already. Having a board out there, I don't think that's a good look. But lasers, sure, go out there and do that. If you want to narrow the time down on a what's allowed on a shot, yes, do it out there. Obviously, get the kinks out before you bring it to the big stage.
Yeah, I agree with you on with the lasers and things. They tried it at the Korn Ferry event at the BMW a few years ago, and I think it works well. And you know what? If The big trouble with the lasers is guys worry about, you're going to shoot this, you're going to shoot that. Is it really going to pick up the pace of play? Maybe you put in something where you're allowed to use a laser a certain amount of times in a round. Like, these guys govern themselves anyway. Why wouldn't you be able to govern yourself? So if you hit a ball, foul ball, you're way out of there, where it's typically going to take your caddy a long time to get your yardage. Maybe that's the time when you allow a laser.
The idea of trying out a shot clock, let's say at the Korn Ferry Tour level. At the Korn Ferry Tour level, you don't have as much distraction and commotion. You don't have the televised product to the magnitude that you have on the PGA Tour. Did you feel in your time there that pace was not as much of an issue as to when you got to the PGA Tour?
I mean, yes, I would agree with that. And I think when you start adding the purses, you're basically 10xing the purse size from Korn Ferry to the PGA Tour. Yes, there's way less pressure. I mean,
there's a
pressure.
weightiness to the PGA Tour that doesn't exist.
Right, and the Korn Ferry Tour courses aren't set up as difficult. I mean, hole locations are on the sides, but the rough hasn't been grown for an entire year waiting for a tournament. I just don't think the tests are as difficult, not to mention all the distractions that you said.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was the big thing, was that the test is so much more difficult on the PGA Tour. Typically, the Korn Ferry was set up for a lot of birdies, and there always are a lot of birdies on that tour. So typically, a harder golf course is going to be a longer round of golf.
Bay Hill this week. I love the fact that it's arduous, man. It is become. People, I think, are now associating this event. It's weird that it wasn't so much like this when Arnold Palmer was still alive. And over the last 5 years, you look at the scoring totals, the winning number. What do you expect this week?
Well, I'm hoping for good weather, because there is no place that changes more from a Friday to a Saturday. It's like they flip this switch and the greens become like this table, just brick hard. And the best example of that is the 17th hole on Sunday, the par 3, right hole location. And guys are intentionally just trying to hit it in that front bunker because it's the best place to come up and down. Now, I'm not a fader of the golf ball, but one year I was playing good and I could fade a 5-iron. And I hit the most beautiful 5-iron trying to go at that pin. It hits just on the green and shoots over the back. Like, you don't hit that shot. You either play for the bunker or the front left and take a 40-footer for birdie. And I personally love watching a test that requires you to hit precision iron shots into firm greens in windy conditions.
Yeah, it's such a true test. Like, you can't fake it around there. You've got to play well, and it is always the best player that shows up at the end of that week. I think we haven't seen it yet this year, outside of maybe Torrey Pines, where it got really tricky, it got a little bit difficult, but this is going to be the firmest set of greens that these guys have seen all year by far.
The thing about the closing stretch there, 15 is one of the sneakiest, most confounding holes. Honest to God. I mean, first of all, you're teeing off from behind a hedge and over the road, and I think the green is very perplexing. 16, you have to take advantage of the 16th hole. 17, like you said, when a ball hits that green, you're just going, okay, is it going to stay on the green or not? It likely is. And then 18 has all this width to it, but effectively, when you're sitting out in the fairway, you're going, there's no depth to that green. It doesn't certainly look like it. I think it's one of the best closing stretches on the PGA Tour.
I mean, you miss the fairway right on 18 and you get a decent lie and it's all cover over the penalty area, or do you lay it up out left? There are decisions to be made. 16 even. 16, with the way the penalty area comes in front of the green, you have to hit shot after shot. It never lets up on that back 9, even the front 9.
I think it's genius, the angles, that the way those greens sit. You're right, like the carry on 16, if you go onto that left side, that carries so much longer. 18 on that right side, that carries so much longer. And you've got to commit to your shots.
Who, over the next 2 weeks, who needs to show you something for you to be even mildly bullish on them by the time we get to Augusta National?
Xander, purely for the fact that he needs to see something. He's been hurt. We don't know what we're going to see out of Xander. But yeah, I mean,
really too bad.
Yeah.
That really his first kind of quarter of the season, and you hope that there can be something that you feel like he's got a puncher's chance coming to Augusta. Anybody stand out for you?
I mean, Max Homa, since finishing T3 at the Masters last year, he moved to 9th in the world after that week. He's had 1 top 10 since, a ton of miscuts, I think 6 miscuts in 19 events. He's plummeted all the way to 66 in the world. He's changed coaches. Like, what is going on with Max Homa? And is it possible for him to rebound and get in any sort of form going forward this year?
I'll give you another name, because when he didn't win it, But when we left Ponte Vedra, I thought to myself, Wyndham Clark is that guy, because he's sitting there, he's playing with Xander. He handled the closing stretch of those holes, had the violent lip on the last hole, and I'm going, okay, he didn't win. The best player in the world just shot nothing to steal this event from everybody. Didn't you feel the same way?
I mean, he was runner-up to Scotty both at Bay Hill and the Players' Championship, and our narrative was, is he going to be the first guy to win the Masters in his first attempt since Fuzzy Zoeller? And, you know, I think we expected so much out of Wyndham. He still had some good weeks since the Players' Championship, but he set the bar so high following that U.S. Open win, following the win at AT&T, following the Florida swing. Like, I think we just lifted him up to a pedestal maybe a little bit too early.
Well, and the way he was talking, like he was ready to challenge Scotty Scheffler. Like every interview we saw with Wyndham Clark, he's like, I'm ready to be the best player in the world.
Yeah, he had a swagger about him. You guys did the TGL thing last night. Boston's already been eliminated from the playoffs. I love saying that, not as it applies to them, but every other Boston team. Doing it, just a quick thought. We got 30 seconds left. Have you liked it?
I've liked it. I didn't like it at first. Now I love it. Boston 0-4-1 with 4 major champions. It's kind of shocking to wrap your head around that.
What about you?
I've loved it from the start, and I'm so happy that he's converted.
Really?
Oh yeah, he was a naysayer
you
at the
liking
first.
everything now is really
I love golf.
weird.
I love golf, Gary. Love golf. All golf. Any kind of golf.
I got in my car this morning at 5:40, and I listened to you guys on the re-air calling TGL with exuberance. Great having you in, as always. Our Players Preview is going to be available on YouTube. Have a great Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.